The first week was the hardest thing Marcus had done since the war. Ember needed food that the station did not sell. Dragons ate a special kind of protein paste that cost more credits than Marcus earned in a month. They needed minerals and vitamins that could not be found in human food. Without proper nutrition, a hatchling would grow sick and weak. Marcus spent his savings on the first shipment. When that ran out, he started working double shifts. He woke before the station's artificial sunrise and did not return to his room until long after the lights dimmed for night cycle. His body ached from exhaustion. His eyes burned from lack of sleep. But every time he came home and saw Ember waiting for him, chirping with happiness, he knew it was worth it. The second problem was heat. Dragons came from volcanic worlds where the air itself could burn human skin. They needed constant warmth to survive. The station's recycled air was too cold, especially in the lower sections where Marcus lived because the rent was cheap. He solved this problem the way he had solved problems during the war. He took things apart and put them together in new ways. From broken heating units and discarded power cells, he built a warming pad for Ember's bed. It was ugly, and it made strange sounds sometimes, but it worked. Ember seemed to understand what Marcus had done. He curled up on the warming pad and purred like a machine with a happy engine. The third problem was Ember himself. His twisted spine made it hard for him to walk. His legs worked, but his balance was wrong. He would take a few steps and then fall over, his useless wings making him tip to one side. Each time he fell, he would make a frustrated sound and try again. Each time, he would fail. Marcus watched this for 2 days before he could not stand it anymore. He spent a week designing and building a small harness that wrapped around Ember's body. It had weights on one side to balance out his wings and supports that helped keep his spine straight. The harness was made from soft materials so it would not hurt, and it had straps that Ember could release himself if he ever felt trapped. The first time, Ember wore it. He stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then he took a step. Then another. Then another. He did not fall. The sound Ember made was like nothing Marcus had ever heard. It was joy and triumph and gratitude all mixed together. He walked around the small room in circles, faster and faster, his copper eyes bright with excitement. Then he climbed up Marcus's leg, across his chest, and wrapped himself around the man's neck like a scarf. Marcus stood there with tears running down his face and did not know why. Word began to spread through the station, as word always does in small places. People whispered about the human who had taken in a dragon. Most of them thought he was crazy. Dragons were sacred to the Dralith. Keeping one without permission was probably illegal in a dozen different ways. But something strange started to happen. A Kalori merchant named Vess started leaving packages outside Marcus's door. The Kalori were small, furry creatures with clever hands and kind hearts. The packages contained protein scraps and mineral supplements, things that Ember needed to grow strong. Marcus tried to pay her once. She refused. "My spawn had birth defects," Vess said, her voice soft. 3 of them. The medical bay wanted to terminate, said they would never be useful. "I raised them myself. They are grown now. Good jobs, good lives." She looked at Ember, who was perched on Marcus's shoulder. The doctors were wrong about them. The Dralith are wrong about him. A Vethany engineer named Cole started appearing in Marcus's work section. The Vethany were tall beings with gray skin and 4 arms, known throughout the galaxy for their technical skills. Cole did not say much, but he helped Marcus improve the heating unit and showed him how to make Ember's harness more comfortable. "I read the Dralith report," Cole said one day, his voice flat and mechanical like all Vethany. They classified him as 0 value. They were measuring the wrong things. Even Commander Gresk, the station's leader, seemed to look the other way. Gresk was a Tauron, a species that looked like Earth bears if bears could talk and pilot starships. He had every reason to report Marcus and avoid trouble with the Dralith. But when Marcus passed him in the corridor one day, Gresk simply nodded and kept walking, as if nothing unusual was happening. As if humans kept dragons in their rooms all the time, Ember grew slowly, much slower than a normal dragon hatchling. After 3 months, he was only the size of a medium dog instead of the small pony he should have been. His scales remained dull gray, never gaining the bright colors that Dralith wore like badges of honor. But he was smart. Terrifyingly smart. Marcus first noticed it when Ember started watching him work. The hatchling would sit on his shoulder during shifts, copper eyes following every movement of Marcus's hands. At first, Marcus thought Ember was just curious, the way young creatures are curious about everything. Then one night, the station's backup generator failed. It was a complicated problem, buried deep in the wiring where human eyes could barely see. Marcus was working by touch, trying to find the broken connection among hundreds of wires. His fingers were getting tired. His mechanical arm was too clumsy for such delicate work. Ember climbed down from his shoulder and to the open panel. His small body fit easily where Marcus could not reach. He sniffed at the wires, moving slowly and carefully. Then he stopped at one specific place and chirped. Marcus pulled the wire Ember had indicated. It was corroded, nearly broken, a fault that would have taken him hours to find. "How did you know?" Marcus whispered. Ember just looked at him with those copper eyes and chirped again. After that, Marcus began to teach him. He showed Ember diagrams and explained how things worked. He let the hatchling watch while he fixed machines and built new devices. Ember absorbed information like dry ground, absorbing rain. The Dralith had thrown him away because he could not fly or breathe fire. They had not considered that he might be brilliant in his small room on a forgotten station. Surrounded by beings who had decided to be kind, Ember learned and grew. He could not do what other dragons did, but he could do things they never imagined. And Marcus, who had thought his life was over, began to realize that maybe it was just beginning. "You know they'll come eventually," Vess said one day. "The Dralith, when they find out. They'll want him back." Marcus looked at Ember, who was carefully sorting wires by color, his small claws moving with surprising precision. "Let them come," he said quietly. "Let them try." He did not know then how soon those words would be tested. He did not know that across the galaxy, a story was spreading. A story about a human and a dragon. A story that the Dralith could not allow to continue. But that trouble was for another day. Today, there was work to do. There was a dragon to raise. There was a family to build from broken pieces. And Marcus Cole, who had forgotten how to hope, was learning again. Kestrel Station was not a place where good things happened. It floated in the empty dark between trade routes, far from any planet worth visiting. Ships came to refuel their engines and buy cheap food. People came when they had nowhere else to go. The station was old and tired, and so were most of the people who lived there. Marcus Cole had called it home for 3 years. He worked in the maintenance section, fixing broken pipes and failed power units. It was simple work that kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. He preferred it that way. Thinking too much brought back memories he wanted to forget. The Hegemony War had ended 5 years ago, but Marcus still carried it with him. He had left pieces of himself on a dozen different worlds. His left arm was gone, replaced by a mechanical one that hummed softly when he moved it. The doctors had given him medals and called him a hero. Marcus had thrown the medals into space during his first week on the station. Heroes were supposed to save people. Marcus had watched too many die. He kept to himself mostly. The other workers knew not to bother him with small talk. He ate alone in his small room, slept alone, and spent his free hours staring out the window at stars that looked like scattered dust. Some nights he wondered why he was still alive when so many better people were not dot. It was during a late shift that everything changed. Marcus was checking the waste processing units in the lower deck. Nobody went there unless they had to. The smell was bad, and the lights flickered in a way that made shadows jump. He was about to leave when he heard a sound. It was soft, like a baby crying, but not quite human dot. He followed the sound to a corner behind one of the large processing machines. There, hidden in the darkness, was a cargo crate. It was small, barely big enough to hold a toolbox. Someone had pushed it there and forgotten about it, or wanted it forgotten. Marcus pulled the crate into the light and opened it. Inside was a creature he had only seen in pictures and news reports. A dragon, a Dralith hatchling. But something was wrong with it. The Dralith were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They were powerful and proud, with scales that shone like precious gems and wings that could carry them through the void of space itself. Their empire had lasted for 10,000 years. Other species treated them with respect and fear. But this hatchling was nothing like the pictures Marcus had seen. Its scales were dull gray, like dirty metal. Its body was small and twisted, with a spine that curved the wrong way. Its wings were crumpled against its back, clearly unable to open properly. It looked up at Marcus with eyes the color of melted copper, and it made that crying sound again. There was a note in the crate, written in trade common so anyone could read it. Defective. No flame sac. Cannot fly. Of no value. Marcus read the words twice. Then he read them again. The Dralith had thrown away one of their own children like garbage. Because it was not perfect. Because it could not do the things a dragon was supposed to do. Because it was broken. Marcus looked at his mechanical arm. He remembered the look on his commander's face when the doctor said he would never fight again. He remembered how quickly the military had sent him away, like a tool that no longer worked. The hatchling made another sound, weaker this time. It was cold in the lower deck, too cold for a creature that needed warmth to survive. If Marcus left it here, it would be dead by morning. Station rules were clear about situations like this. He was supposed to report any unusual findings to the commander. The commander would contact the Dralith, and they would come to collect their property. Or more likely, they would tell the station to dispose of it quietly. The galaxy did not need to know that the mighty Dralith sometimes produced children that were less than perfect. Marcus thought about the rules. He thought about doing the correct thing, the official thing, the thing that would keep him out of trouble. Then he picked up the crate with the hatchling inside and walked back to his quarters. His room was small and plain, with a bed that was too hard and a window that showed the same stars every night. It was not a place for a dragon, not even a broken one. But it was warm and it was safe, and right now that was enough. Marcus set the crate on his bed and looked at the hatchling. It had stopped crying. Its copper eyes watched him with an intelligence that surprised him. Dragons were supposed to be smart, smarter than humans, some said, but this one was so young. It should not have been able to understand anything yet, but it seemed to understand that Marcus was not going to hurt it. "I don't know what I'm doing," Marcus said out loud. He felt foolish talking to a creature that could not answer. "I can barely take care of myself. I don't know anything about dragons." The hatchling chirped softly. It was a small sound, almost hopeful. Marcus sighed and rubbed his face with his real hand. His mechanical one was too cold for that. "You need a name, I suppose, if you're going to stay." He thought about it for a moment. The hatchling could not breathe fire, could not fly, could not do any of the things that made dragons legendary. But it was still alive, still fighting to survive despite everything. "Ember," Marcus said finally. "That's what I'll call you." A small spark, not quite a flame, but still burning. The hatchling that was now called Ember made a sound that might have been approval. Then it crawled out of the crate on shaky legs and pressed itself against Marcus's chest. Seeking warmth, Marcus sat very still. He had not touched another living creature with kindness in years. He had forgotten what it felt like. The small weight against his chest, the soft breathing, the trust in those copper eyes. Something inside him, something that had been frozen for a very long time, began to thaw. "All right," he whispered, his voice rough. "All right. We'll figure this out together." Outside the window, the stars continued their endless burning. The station hummed with the sounds of machines and sleeping people. And in a small room that had never been a home before, a broken man and a broken dragon began to heal each other, one heartbeat at a time. Neither of them knew what the future would bring. Neither of them knew the trouble that was coming. But for now, in this quiet moment, they had found something that the galaxy said they did not deserve. They had found each other. The Dralith ship appeared without warning on a morning like any other. Marcus was eating breakfast in his room when the station's alarms began to sound. Not the emergency alarms that meant danger, but the formal ones that announced important visitors. He went to his window and saw it. The ship was huge. It made Kestrel Station look like a toy floating next to a whale. Its hull was gold and silver, decorated with patterns that had been old when humans were still living in caves. This was not a trading vessel or a military cruiser. This was a diplomatic ship, the kind that carried important people who expected the galaxy to bow before them. Amber climbed onto Marcus's shoulder and made a low, worried sound. "I know," Marcus said softly. "I know." They came for him 2 hours later. 3 station guards knocked on his door, their faces unhappy. They were not bad people, Marcus knew. They were just doing their jobs. "Commander Gresk wants to see you," one of them said. "There are visitors." Marcus nodded. He picked up Ember, who wrapped around his neck in his usual position, and followed the guards through the station's corridors. People watched him pass. Some looked sad. Some looked angry. None of them said anything. The commander's office was large by station standards, which meant it was still small compared to most rooms on normal planets. But today it felt tiny because of who was standing inside. 5 Dralith warriors stood against the walls. They wore ceremonial armor that shone like liquid metal, and they carried weapons that could cut through steel like paper. Their scales were brilliant colors, blues and greens and reds that seemed to glow with inner light. They watched Marcus with eyes full of cold contempt, but they were not the ones who mattered. In the center of the room stood a female, Dralith in flowing robes instead of armor. Her scales were white and gold, colors that Marcus had read meant high birth among her people. She was taller than any human, beautiful in a way that seemed almost painful to look at. Everything about her spoke of power and ancient pride. Commander Gresk stood behind his desk, looking uncomfortable. The old Tauroan had seen many things in his long life, but having Dralith nobility in his office was clearly not something he had expected. "Mr. Cole," Gresk said, his deep voice careful. "This is Emissary Velthris of House Velthrix. She has come to discuss a matter regarding the hatchling in your possession." Marcus felt Ember tighten around his neck. He reached up with his real hand and touched the dragon's head gently. "He's not my possession," Marcus said. "His name is Ember." The emissary's perfect face twisted with disgust. "It has no name. It has no worth. It was discarded according to our ancient laws, as is our right." She looked at Ember the way someone might look at garbage stuck to their shoe. That a human would lower himself to care for such a thing is disturbing, but not surprising. Your species has always lacked proper understanding of value. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, hot and bitter. But he had learned during the war to keep his emotions hidden. His face stayed calm. If he has no value, why are you here? The question hung in the air. The Dralith warriors shifted uncomfortably. The emissary's golden eyes narrowed. It was Commander Gresk who answered, his voice tired. The story has spread, Mr. Cole. News reports, social networks, independent journalists. Everyone is talking about the human who adopted a Dralith hatchling. It has become complicated. An embarrassment, the emissary corrected sharply. Our enemies use this story as propaganda. They say it proves the Dralith are cruel, that we throw away our own children. They say humans are more compassionate than us. She spat the word compassionate like it was poison. This cannot be allowed to continue. So you want him back, Marcus said. The child you threw away like garbage. Now that it's embarrassing, you want him back. We want this matter resolved, the emissary said. We are prepared to offer compensation. 50,000 credits for your trouble. You can buy a new life somewhere far from here. Forget this ever happened. Marcus laughed. It was not a nice laugh. 50,000 credits. For my son. The emissary's scales flickered, a sign of surprise. Your son? The creature is Dralith. It cannot be your son. I found him abandoned and starving. I fed him. I kept him warm. I built things to help him walk when his own body failed him. I taught him and cared for him and loved him. Marcus's voice was steady, but there was iron underneath it. Where I come from, that makes him my son. This is absurd, the emissary said. We are offering you wealth and freedom. Take the credits and walk away. This is not a request. No. The single word filled the room. The Dralith warriors put their hands on their weapons. Commander Gresk closed his eyes like he was praying. The emissary stepped closer to Marcus. She towered over him, her presence heavy with ancient power. You are one human, she said quietly. You are nothing. We are the Dralith. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. If we wanted to take the creature by force, nothing could stop us. Marcus looked up at her. He was smaller, weaker, mortal in ways she would never understand. But he did not look away. Matey, he said, but you haven't done that. You came with diplomats, not soldiers. You offered money, not threats. You want this to be quiet, to go away without anyone noticing. He smiled, and there was no warmth in it. You're afraid. Not of me. Of what it would look like if the mighty Dralith sent an army to steal a crippled hatchling from a broken-down veteran. The emissary's face went still. Her scales stopped moving entirely. You are making a mistake, she said. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, Marcus replied. This isn't one of them. Ember lifted his head from Marcus's shoulder. His copper eyes met the emissary's golden ones. And then, for the first time since Marcus had found him, Ember opened his mouth, and Hiss thought it was not the roar of a mighty dragon. It was small and thin, almost funny, but it was defiance. It was a creature who had been thrown away standing up and refusing to be taken. The emissary looked at Ember with something that might have been shock. Then she turned away. This is not over, she said to Commander Gresk. We will pursue all legal options. The creature belongs to House Valthrix. One way or another, we will have what is ours. She swept out of the office, her warriors following. The door closed behind them with a sound like a tomb ceiling. Shut. Commander Gresk let out a long breath. You just made enemies of one of the most powerful houses in the galaxy, Mr. Cole. Marcus looked down at Ember, who was still perched on his shoulder, small and gray and defiant. I know, he said softly, but some things are worth fighting for. He walked out of the commander's office and back into the station corridors. People were watching more than before. Word had spread fast. Marcus did not know what would happen next. He did not know how he would fight an empire with nothing but his hands and his heart. But he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to give up his son without a fight. The Dralith ship left Kestrel Station 3 days after Ember spoke his first words. It departed in the dark hours when most of the station was sleeping, without ceremony or announcement. One moment it was there, and then it was gone, vanishing into the endless black between stars. Marcus watched it go from his window, Ember warm against his neck. "Do you think they will come back?" Ember asked. His voice was still rough, still new, but growing stronger every day. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "Maybe, but I don't think so." He was right. A week later, a data packet arrived at his personal terminal. It was written in old Dralith script, the kind used for official documents. Marcus could not read it, but Cold of Ethany translated it for him. It was a renunciation. House Valthrix was formally abandoning all claims to the hatchling known as Designation 073. He was no longer considered Dralith property. He was no longer part of their bloodline or their records. In the eyes of galactic law, he belonged to no one. Or rather, he belonged to whoever he chose. There was a second document attached to the first. This one was in trade common, meant for Marcus to read directly. "The creature has chosen," it said. "We acknowledge this choice. It is no longer our concern." There was no signature, no personal message, no apology for abandoning a child because he was different. The Dralith did not apologize. They simply moved on, as they had moved on from countless things in their 10,000 years of empire. But there was one more thing at the bottom of the document. A single line that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. "By the authority of House Valthrix, the creature is hereby released into the permanent guardianship of Marcus Cole. Citizen of Earth, may he bear the burden he has chosen." Ember read the words over Marcus's shoulder. "What does that mean?" He asked. Marcus had to try 3 times before he could speak. "It means you're my son," he said. "Officially, legally, in every way that matters." Ember was quiet for a moment. Then he made a sound that Marcus had never heard before, a sound somewhere between a purr and a sob. "I already knew that," Ember said softly. "But it is nice to have it in writing." The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. Marcus kept working at Kestrel Station for a while, but things had changed. He was no longer invisible, no longer forgotten. People knew his name. They knew his story. Ships would dock just so their crews could meet the human who had defied the Dralith and won. Marcus did not like the attention, but Ember seemed to enjoy it. The small gray dragon would perch on his shoulder and answer questions with a wisdom that surprised everyone. He was growing, slowly but steadily. By the time 2 years had passed, he was the size of a large dog. Still small for a dragon, but bigger than anyone had expected. His scales remained gray, but they had developed a subtle pattern that caught the light in interesting ways. His wings never grew strong enough to fly, but he could glide short distances if he climbed high enough first. And his mind continued to grow sharper than any blade. The station's engineers started coming to Ember for help with difficult problems. Then engineers from other stations. Then engineers from ships and planets across the sector. The broken dragon, who could not fly or breathe fire, had become one of the most respected technical minds in the region. "It is ironic," Ember said one day, while he was helping Marcus repair a particularly complicated piece of equipment. "The Dralith threw me away because I could not do what dragons are supposed to do. But I can do things no dragon has ever done." "Like what?" Marcus asked. "Like understand humans," Ember said. "Like see value in things that are broken. Like know that strength comes in many forms." He looked at Marcus with his copper eyes. "Like have a father who loves me." Marcus had to look away so Ember would not see his tears. When Ember was 5 years old, something unexpected happened. A human starship arrived at Kestrel Station, not a trading vessel or a military cruiser, but an exploration ship. It was heading into uncharted space, looking for new worlds and new possibilities. Its captain was a woman named Sarah Chen, a veteran of the same war Marcus had fought in. She had heard his story and come specifically to meet him. "I need an engineer," she said. "Someone who can fix anything, solve any problem, keep a ship running when everything else falls apart." She looked at Ember, who was perched on his usual spot on Marcus's shoulder. "I also need someone who can see things differently. Someone who knows what it feels like to be underestimated." Ember and Marcus looked at each other. Neither of them spoke, but something passed between them. An understanding that had grown over years of sharing struggles and triumphs. "Both of us?" Marcus asked. Captain Chun smiled. "I would not have it any other way." And so they left Kestrel Station behind. The ship was called the Horizon, and it carried a crew of beings from many different species. Humans and Kellori and Vethany and others, all working together to explore the unknown. Marcus became the chief engineer. Ember became his assistant, and then his partner, and eventually something that no dragon had ever been before. The first Dralith to serve on a human starship. Word spread across the galaxy. The story that had started on a forgotten station grew into something larger. People began to talk about what it meant. Not just the story of Marcus and Ember, but what it said about humans and their strange way of seeing the world. In the great archives where historians recorded the rise and fall of empires. A new entry was added to the file on humanity. They found a broken dragon and made him whole. They faced an empire and did not bend. They saw something that others called worthless and recognized its value. This is what humans do. They find broken things and fix them. They find forgotten things and remember them. They find thrown away things and give them homes. This is why they are strange. This is why they are dangerous. This is why, despite all logic and expectation, they matter. They do not accept that something is worthless just because others say so. They do not abandon those who need them. They do not give up. And because of this, the galaxy will never be the same. On the bridge of the horizon, many years after a maintenance worker found a dying hatchling in a cargo crate, Marcus Cole sat in the engineer's chair and watched stars drift past the windows. Ember lay curled in a specially designed seat beside him, his gray scales shining softly in the light of distant suns. They had traveled far. They had seen wonders that most beings could only dream of. They had faced dangers and overcome them together. But the best part, the part that mattered most, was simpler than any of that. "Father," Ember said quietly. He still called Marcus that, even though he was now larger than any human. "Where are we going next?" Marcus smiled and reached out to rest his hand on Ember's head, feeling the warmth of scales that had once been cold and dying. "Wherever we want," he said. "That's the wonderful thing about the future. It belongs to us." Outside the ship, the universe stretched on forever, full of mysteries and possibilities. A broken man and a broken dragon flew through it together, proving something that needed to be proved again and again. Throughout history, that worth is not something you are born with. It is something you create. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one act of kindness, one choice to care, one refusal to let the galaxy tell you that something has no value, because everything has value. Everything can be saved. And sometimes, the things that seem most broken turn out to be the most beautiful of all. This is what it means to be human. This is why they endure. And this is why, across all the stars and all the worlds and all the ages to come, their story will never be forgotten. The Dralith did not leave. Their great ship remained docked at Kestrel Station, a constant reminder of their presence. Every day brought new messages, new demands, new threats wrapped in polite words. They spoke of ancient laws and sacred traditions. They spoke of treaties that gave them rights over their own kind, even those they had thrown away. Marcus ignored the messages. He went to work. He came home. He took care of Ember. He waited that the emissary tried different approaches. She offered more money, enough to buy a small ship and disappear into the far reaches of space. Marcus refused. She threatened legal action through the Galactic Council, which could take years and might not even succeed. Marcus said he would wait. Finally, on the 5th day, she threatened to take Ember by force. "We have the right," she said through the communication screen. "The creature is Dralith property. If you do not surrender it willingly, we will board the station and take it. The council may complain, but they will do nothing. They never do." Marcus turned off the screen without answering. That night, something unexpected happened. It started with Vess, the Kalori merchant. She appeared at Marcus's door with a bag full of supplies and a determined look on her small, furry face. "I am staying," she said. "Here, outside your room. Until they leave or until they try something." Marcus tried to argue. It was too dangerous. The Dralith would not care about hurting bystanders. She should think of her own safety. Vess simply sat down in the corridor and started unpacking her bag. "My children are alive because I did not listen to people who said they were worthless," she said. "I am not going to start listening now." By morning, she was not alone. Cole, the Vethany engineer, arrived with tools and sensors. "If they try to breach the door, I will know," he said in his flat voice. "And I have informed my guild. We do not approve of taking children from their parents." More came. Station workers, merchants, travelers who had been passing through and heard the story. Humans in Kalori and Vethany and Torwan and species Marcus did not even recognize. They filled the corridor outside his room. They filled the corridors nearby. They did not carry weapons or make threats. They simply stood there, a silent wall of bodies and quiet determination. The Dralith warriors grew nervous. They stood at the edge of the crowd, uncertain. They had come expecting to intimidate one broken human. They had not expected this. Commander Gresk arrived on the 2nd day of the standoff. He pushed through the crowd with difficulty, his large Tarwan body barely fitting in the packed corridor. "This is highly irregular," he said when he reached Marcus. But there was something in his eyes that looked almost like approval. "The Dralith are threatening to call this an act of rebellion. Is it?" Marcus asked. Gresk looked at the crowd around them. Beings from a dozen different species, standing together for no reason except that they believed it was right. "I have served the Galactic Council for 40 years, Gresk said slowly. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen species go to war over territory and resources and pride. But I have never seen anything quite like this." He shook his head. "Humans are strange creatures. We're stubborn," Marcus said. "Yes," Gresk agreed. "That is exactly what I mean." On the 5th day, the emissary came in person. The crowd parted to let her through, not out of fear, but to let what was going to happen. She walked with her head high, her white and gold scales gleaming, her warriors behind her. She stopped in front of Marcus's door. "You cannot win this," she said. "You know that. Even with all these beings protecting you, you cannot stand against the Dralith Empire forever." "Maybe not," Marcus said. He stood in his doorway, Ember on his shoulder as always. "But I can stand against you today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. For as long as it takes. Why?" The emissary's voice cracked with genuine confusion. "Why would you suffer so much for a broken creature that is not even your species? It makes no sense." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He thought about his life before Ember, the emptiness, the darkness, the feeling that nothing mattered anymore. "Because he needed someone," Marcus said finally. "And so did I." The emissary stared at him. For a moment, something flickered in her golden eyes. Something that might have been doubt. Then Ember did something no one expected. He climbed down from Marcus's shoulder. His small gray body moved carefully, using the harness Marcus had built for him. His legs were still weak, his spine still twisted, but he walked without falling. He walked across the floor until he stood directly in front of the emissary. He was tiny compared to her, a broken thing facing a perfect one. And then he spoke. His voice was rough and strange, like rocks grinding together. Dragons were not supposed to speak until they were much older. But somehow, impossibly, words came from Ember's throat. I choose him. The emissary stepped back as if she had been struck. Her warriors made sounds of shock. Through the crowd, gasps and whispers spread like fire. What did you say? The emissary breathed. Ember lifted his copper eyes to meet her golden ones. I choose him, he said again, clearer this time. He is my family, my home, my heart. I choose him. In Dralith culture, Marcus had learned, a hatchling's first words were sacred. They were a declaration of self, of identity, of place in the world. They could not be taken back or ignored. They were binding in ways that even ancient laws could not overrule. And Ember had made his declaration in front of witnesses from a dozen species. There would be no hiding this. No pretending it had not happened. The emissary's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, anger, disbelief, and finally, something that looked almost like defeat. He's broken, she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. He cannot fly, cannot breathe fire, cannot do anything a dragon should do. Why would he choose a human over his own kind? Ember looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to Marcus. He climbed up to his shoulder and settled there, pressing against the man's neck. He fixed me, Ember said. When everyone else threw me away, he picked me up. He built me legs that work. He gave me food when I was hungry and warmth when I was cold. He taught me things no dragon ever taught me. Ember's copper eyes met the emissary's golden ones one final time. We fixed each other, he said. That is why I choose him. That is why I will always choose him. The emissary stood very still. The crowd was completely silent. Even the station itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the emissary turned away. This is not over, she said. But her voice was hollow now, empty of conviction. House Valthrix will consider its options. She walked back through the crowd, her warriors following. No one tried to stop her. No one needed to. When she was gone, Commander Gresk let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. I do not think they will return, he said quietly. A hatchling's first words. Even the Dralith cannot ignore that. Marcus did not respond. He was too busy holding Ember close, tears running down his face. You spoke, he whispered. You actually spoke. Ember chirped in his old familiar way. But then he spoke again, and this time his voice was stronger. Of course I spoke, he said. I had something worth saying. Around them, the crowd began to cheer. Beings who had never met each other were hugging and celebrating. Something important had happened here, something that would be remembered, but Marcus barely noticed. All he could see was the small gray dragon on his shoulder. His son, his family, his reason for living. Thank you, Marcus whispered. Ember pressed closer to him. Thank you, the dragon replied. For everything? Outside the station windows, stars burned in the endless dark. But inside, in a crowded corridor filled with unlikely allies, there was only warmth and light and the beginning of something new, something like hope.